I'm now here with Dr. Nadia Waheed, a retina specialist with the New England Eye Center. She's also on faculty at Tufts and is at the Boston Imaging Retina Center as director. Nadia, thanks for joining us.
Of course, it's a pleasure.
Great. Well, Nadia, we're talking a little bit about OCTA here, and I understand OptiView was one of the innovators in that realm. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure, absolutely. So OptiView was, one of the first companies that commercialized OCT angiography. As you know, OCT angiography is a non-invasive means of visualizing the vessels inside the eye. Mm-hmm. And OptiView developed this special software technique called the split spectrum amplitude decorrelation algorithm, or the SADA algorithm, to compare differences between different OCT scans and to generate a vascular map of the back of the retina. This was about 3 years ago or so. They deployed machines as part of a research project into various different centers. And when the retina specialists saw what beautiful images were being produced out of these machines, I think everyone was hooked. And from there on forth, they licensed several algorithms to help with motion correction and to help generate better images. Things improved. The device got passed by the FDA, and here we are.
So basically, it's a convenient form of taking an OCT. Is that right?
That's right. So what OCT angiography actually does is it shows you the vasculature in the back of the eye, and so it's similar to what you would get in a fluorescein angiogram or an ICG, but on OCT, the OCT angiography, the huge advantage is you don't have to use dye.
Yeah.
So you don't need to, you don't need to prick your patients. You don't need to inject dye into them. There isn't the same risk of allergy and anaphylaxis that could, is rare but could potentially happen with dye. And the other huge advantage is that the images that you get, the vascular images, are actually derived from the structural images, so they're cross-registered with the structural images.
Sure.
So you can correlate structure to vessels. So if you're seeing something funky happening in the vessels, you can look to see what exactly is happening in the structural OCT at that very spot and get an idea of what exactly is going on in the patient's eyes.
And so, for today's clinical use, are most doctors trying to transition over to OCTA, or are they still using both that and more of a conventional form of OCT?
So OCT angiography actually doesn't replace OCT. It's a supplement to your traditional OCT. What doctors are finding themselves doing less and less of, however, is the invasive angiography.
I see.
So we do less and less of fluorescein angiography and ICG angiography. We still need them in certain circumstances, but in the vast majority of cases, such as in patients, with macular degeneration, if I get an OCT and I see signs of macular degeneration, I can get an OCTA, I can actually visualize the blood vessels, and that's enough for me to be very comfortable making a diagnosis, for example, of wet macular degeneration. Similarly, in diabetics, I often use it, to visualize the vascular changes that happen in diabetics. If I have a proliferative diabetic retinopathy patient, I'll often use the OCT angiography over the area of the abnormal vasculature to make sure that it truly is proliferative and it's not just, vascular abnormalities, but they're truly projecting into the vitreous cavity. So for a lot of purposes, I use it kind of as a first line instead of fluorescein, and most of the time I get my answer from OCT angiography, and then if I don't, and if I need to go on to the next step, then I'll get a fluorescein or an ICG.
Sure. And here at ARVO, there have been innovations that are much talked about. There has been some talk about swept source OCT versus spectral domain OCT. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about OCTA, does that apply to both of these categories or one only? So
you can get OCT angiography on both the swept source and the spectral domain platforms as long as your speed of acquisition is fast enough. So OptiView has a spectral domain platform with a very high speed, about almost close to 100,000 scans a second, somewhere between 80 and 100,000 scans a second. And so that gives you the ability, when you have these high-speed spectral domain systems, to get OCT angiography. They also have something very special called the split spectrum amplitude decorrelation algorithm, and what that does is it kind of splits the spectrum, performs decorrelation, and then kind of averages the images together. And one of the advantages of that is that it then gives you more information than using an algorithm without splitting the spectrum.
So, Nadia, I'd like to talk a little bit about swept source OCT, and specifically at this meeting, we've heard more about the Re Network, which is part of what Zeiss is doing. Can you tell me a little bit about your involvement there?
Sure. So, as you know, Zeiss has their standard spectral domain OCT platform, but they also have a Source OCT platform that's kind of more a research kind of an instrument. It is FDA approved, and it's available to centers that are participating in research. And so the RE network is really a network of physicians who have the Source OCT angiography device. And one of the things that we were noticing was that all of us were doing research using our OCT and OCT angiography machines, but it takes a long time to enroll the number of patients that you need to enroll to get meaningful results. And so the whole RE platform it's physician driven, it's researcher driven, and the whole idea is that collaboration and data sharing really enhance your ability to get meaningful endpoints. And so it's a whole, it's a group of physicians, all of whom have this device, all of whom are interested in doing research on the device, and all of us, present our ideas to the rest of the committee. If it's something that interests other people within the committee, we develop a collaboration, and then, we enroll our patients, we accumulate data, and then we look at the data amongst a group of people who are collaborating, and hopefully this will help us, look at some of the bigger problems in ophthalmology, some of the things that interest us, some issues about disease progression that we're really interested in, and not just be working, individually in our own little silos, but to kind of use the power of collaboration to come up with some interesting answers. One of the things that I'm leading at the RE network, for example, are the impact on the Swagger studies, and they are studies that look at changes that happen in basically natural history of patients with intermediate and advanced dry macular degeneration. And one of the huge advantages of the RE network is that we have within this study almost about 20 or 25 sites that are gathering patients, and so it allows us to gather a critical mass of patients so that we can study the natural history and the progression of these diseases in a meaningful way, and also at the end of it maybe come up with clinical trial endpoints that can help shorten the time that it takes to take a drug from the start until we can get it FDA approved. And so, the whole idea is to generate new biomarkers, understand disease pathology in dry macular degeneration, and also to kind of shorten the duration that it takes for drug development to take place. And other people similarly within the RE network are pursuing collaborations in diabetes that we're also taking part in. And so, it's a great platform for a researcher to pitch their idea and then to have other researchers kind of pull on their behalf and participate and collaboratively work with them.
Sure, and the way that I've sort of understood it as well is it's almost like a wiki kind of network where it's kind of a little bit more open sourced and provides ease of collaboration and communication about advancements in OCT.
Oh, absolutely. So one of the things that Zeiss has done to support the RE network is that they have a portal, an RE network portal, and so it's a space, it's an open space in which people can create collaborations. They can upload their images and share with other people that they want to share them with within the RE network. They can try new softwares. They can propose new softwares to Zeiss, and potentially have Zeiss engineers build those new softwares. So yes, it's a great collaboration space that happens, and that facilitates that communication that happens between researchers who are interested in similar things.
That's great, and perhaps this is a prototype for the future, because I would imagine that when it comes to research and advancements, that kind of wiki model might begin by applying it to OCT, but I would think other things as well could formulate.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that we've learned over the past couple of decades is that, if you silo research, it becomes duplicate. You duplicate things between sites, and it becomes enormously expensive. And so, collaboration, obviously, and data sharing is the way to go of the future. And I think this is a good step in that direction. I think that pretty much many of the big innovations that we're going to see in disease, and many of the big understandings that we're going to see about disease coming out will be when different researchers collaborate in this way and kind of bring their ideas together and bring their resources to bear together.
Yeah, and in terms of the Source OCT technology itself through the RE network, what is that helping with? Is it making OCT faster?
So the SweatSource platform is a couple of things, right? The advantages of the SweatSource are that it's typically faster than a spectral domain system. Intrinsically, one of the advantages of the SweatSource is that it typically deals with longer wavelengths of light, and longer wavelengths can penetrate media opacities better. There's less sensitivity roll-off, so you can image. They have a wider, deeper imaging range, and so you can image all the way down to the choroid and even to the bottom of the choroid, for example. And the faster speeds mean that you can get wider and wider, scan areas without it being cumbersome on the patient in terms of scanning time. The advantages of that would be you're able to image around opacities, you're able to image more densely over the same amount of time and therefore get better images, you're able to image wider fields of view, and that you're able to get all the way down into the choriocapillaris and reliably image the choriocapillaris as well as the larger choroidal blood vessels and draw conclusions about those, which you can't do in a traditional spectral domain because most of the light that goes through is absorbed by the retinal pigment epithelium, so it doesn't really get to the choroid as well.
Sure. And so SSOCT certainly is coming online now, but there are questions as to, is it best served as a research function now? Is now the time when it's being properly commercialized? Different companies have different types of SSOCT. What's your view on all of this?
So I think two of the big drawbacks of SweatSource, really, right, are the fact that it's very costly, right, and the other one is that we've traditionally not had very reliable laser supplies to supply the SweatSource laser, right. However, having said that, when it comes to be, as we've seen in any free market, when you start, when the demand for something goes up, both the cost and the stability of the manufacturers and the devices they manufacture gets better. So I think it's just a matter of getting to that critical volume when we'll realize that we're able to manufacture this much less expensively than we are right now. But I think right now we're at the place where we're looking at very high costs for some of these devices, which is why there's this whole debate about spectral domain and SweatSource OCT. Spectral domain, of course, being much lower cost than your SweatSource systems.
Sure. And also, I suppose now, SweatSource OCT, I mean, whether you consider it commercialized or something for the future, the insights there, you might also be able to apply to spectral domain OCT today, from what I understand.
So, absolutely. I mean, I think SweatSource is fantastic as a research tool. I think it's taught us many things, and some of those things we're able to take back into spectral domain and apply them. I mean, so that I think is certainly the case. But also, I do feel that SweatSource gives you on a day-to-day, patient-to-patient basis some of the advantages that spectral domain may not necessarily give you. However, keep in mind that SweatSource does, the SweatSource platform itself does theoretically tend to be lower resolution than a spectral domain platform, although much of that, when you're actually looking at real-life images, is made up for the fact that because the SweatSource scans faster, it can get greater density of scans and therefore provide you more rich information than a traditional spectral domain platform would.
So it sounds like both of these modalities may be making their way into clinics, and both may still have their uses for the next, foreseeable future.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's absolutely correct, yes.
That's great. Well, Nadia, thanks again for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you on Pyland.
It's been a pleasure being here on Pyland. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.